The impression the jurors got of that emotional testimony. Ruth, thank you very much for that live report.
Well, Detroit's water shutoff policy once again front and center in federal court.
And a ruling which came down moments ago could have a big impact on everyone living in the city. Fox 2's legal analyst Charlie Langton has been in court all morning and joins us from downtown. Charlie, does this mean they are going to start shutting off people's water starting when?
Starting now. If you don't pay your water bill, your water will be shut off. And the judge said it's perfectly legal to do so. A lot of residents very unhappy with the bankruptcy judge, Stephen Rhodes, who essentially said, no free water. You pay your bill. There's no constitutional right to water. Now, specifically, the judge said that he really didn't have the jurisdiction or the authority to run essential city services. That's the city has the policy. They can develop their own water shutoff policy. But the judge went further. He said that even if he had the authority, he said that residents did not make their case. The judge specifically said that the city's new low-income water assistance plan was good, in fact, commendable, and that not allowing shutoffs could cause Detroit a financial hit, something that the city cannot afford at this time. Now, Alice Jennings, she is the attorney for the residents. She's really unhappy with the judge. I asked her if Detroit is in a water crisis right now.
Certainly it's a crisis, and now that we've reached a very difficult flu season and medical season here in the city, we must look to our leaders to give us some help.
We're going to stay in the trenches, because if one person, one family don't have water in Detroit, your family is next. We're not dummies, and we're not village idiots. We're the people that's calling folks out to fight for the next generation, that they have a right to water. It's a basic need, and it should be supported and fought for as a human right.
But that's not what the judge said. Anyway, they vowed to take their case perhaps to another court or perhaps to city council. Now, in another bankruptcy ruling today, the bankruptcy judge surprised even more people by allowing Robert Davis. Remember him? He is now a convicted felon, but the judge allowed him to sue the city of Detroit over an Open Meetings Act violation. Why? Because Robert Davis was complaining that when the city council met in closed doors to negotiate a deal with Kevin Orr, that violated the act. No guarantee that Robert Davis is going to win, but the bankruptcy judge said at least Robert Davis has a right to sue the city, and we'll see what happens with that case. Be sure Robert Davis will file that lawsuit. Reporting live outside the bankruptcy court in Detroit, Charlie Langton, Fox 2 News. Back to you guys.
Yeah, Charlie, this water decision obviously will affect so many Detroiters. Can we expect to see more demonstrations like we have seen? And is it likely that they'll make any difference?
Well, there were some demonstrators out here, probably about, I would say, 20, 30 people, a lot from the plaintiffs, a lot of the Michigan welfare rights organizations. Yes, I think there will be more protests because they argue that water is a basic human necessity. If you want to look at specifically what the judge said, he said that not having water is harmful. People can die because of it. So the judge found that. But he said, though, that the city had a plan, the plan was good enough, and that people should pay their water. And if the city wants to change its policy, that's for the city to do, not a bankruptcy judge. I do think the city's going to take a more aggressive approach to collecting water. After all, testimony came out that over $89 million is outstanding of water collections. Oh yeah, I think the city's going to be collecting those waters, and you know what? If you don't pay, expect your water to be shut off. It's all legal now.
All right, Charlie Langton reporting live. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Good afternoon, I'm Rhonda Walker. Thank you so much for joining us for Local 4 News at noon. Well, for weeks, unpaid water bills have become a major focal point in the bankruptcy trial. And after 2 days of testimony from both sides last week, a judge has decided that he will not stop the city from shutting off water if people can't pay their bill. Our Rob Maloney is live outside of federal court on how the city moves forward from here. Rob, good afternoon.
Yep. Good afternoon, Ronnie. Now, this was one of the more curious corners of the bankruptcy case, and here is why. It was like a month and a half ago, that the judge had said clearly that he did not have jurisdiction in this case, and that even though there were international headlines that greatly concerned him, he didn't think that he had jurisdiction. And yet, he allowed a 2-day trial, had everybody come out and make their case, and today, he came up with the same conclusion he had a month and a half ago. Judge Rhodes was direct this morning after 2 days of testimony and several more to make his decision. He said, quote, "The bankruptcy court has nothing to say in the matter. The complaint must be dismissed," end quote. The goal was, through a temporary restraining order, to have the city of Detroit take a 6-month moratorium on water shutoffs to give the protesters who sued time to negotiate a program with the city to deal with those so poor they can't pay their water bills. As a result of the case, the city came up with a 10-point plan to deal with late water bills, and the judge said of that, quote, "It is a bold, commendable, necessary plan," end quote. And while it doesn't really address the poorest of the poor, the judge said it is not his role as a bankruptcy judge to tell the city how to run its business. And as for the assertion in the suit that water is a legal right, he said, quote, "There is no such right in law, much like that of shelter, food, or medical care," end quote. Attorney Alice Jennings filed the suit and was greatly disappointed in the judge's decision.
We don't agree with the judge's decision. We think that if the judge has the jurisdiction to decide there should be a regional authority over water, the judge should have the authority to decide whether or not there needs to be an affordable water plan.
Now, Jennings says that she is likely going to appeal. She's often discussing that now, but she felt, and she was actually quite critical of Judge Rhodes out here on the sidewalk outside of the federal court, thinking that he did not listen very well to her side of the case, and so she wants to perhaps move this thing forward. We'll see where that goes. In the meantime, the judge did say that the city's water department cannot in any way deal with a 6-month moratorium that would shut off revenue to the department. He says they can't afford that hit. And so that's another reason why he felt that there was no reason to approve this temporary restraining order as had been asked for. Back to you.
Well, Ryan, I know it was a busy morning over there in bankruptcy court. In addition to that, wasn't there another decision raising some eyebrows?
Yes, Ronnie, you're absolutely right. It was a fascinating bit of litigation and theater. Robert Davis, whose name we've heard quite regularly and has pled guilty, is an admitted felon, and is heading off to prison, still filed one of his patented lawsuits, and he went and sent his attorney in from the AFSCME union, and the claim is that the city of Detroit broke the Public Open Meetings Act by last week doing the negotiations of the Kevin Orr power transfer back to the mayor and to the city council. And when they pled the case, the judge said that this is no frivolous case, and he has given permission to Davis's attorney to go ahead and file a suit in Wayne County Court, and we can imagine that will be coming up in the next few weeks.
Will be interesting to see how that all plays out. Rod, thank you.
Fox 2 News that works for you, starts now.
There is no right to free water. That's the ruling from the federal bankruptcy judge in Detroit.
Judge Stephen Rhodes says water shutoffs can and will continue in the city for customers with delinquent bills. Fox 2's Robin Schwartz with reaction to the judge's decision.
A handful of protesters stood outside the federal courthouse in Detroit, angry and frustrated about the decision from U.S. bankruptcy judge Stephen Rhodes. He rejected arguments for a 6-month ban on water shutoffs, saying water is not a constitutional right, and stopping the shutoffs would be a financial hit to the water and sewer department, which the city simply cannot afford.
How morally inept and bankrupt could the bankruptcy court judge be that he could sit there in that courtroom, listen to the testimonies of those who have tried to have access to water and who have been denied continuously, and still not grant restraint?
Rhodes made the ruling after 2 days of hearings last week, saying he understood the scope of the problem, but adding that he lacks the power to issue a water shutoff moratorium.
We're not dummies, and we're not village idiots. We're the people that calling folks out to fight for the next generation.
We believe that there is a right to water, and there is a right to affordable water. And we're going to take it to the next level.
Those fighting to stop the shutoffs are vowing to appeal, saying this is a health and safety issue. A representative with the Detroit Water Brigade told me by phone the group will continue to put pressure on the mayor, the water department, the city council, and the governor. And they'll be asking residents to share water as part of a relief effort. So where do we stand right now? Well, a month-long moratorium on shutoffs ended in August. Right now, crews are shutting off about 400 accounts a day. and about 24,000 have been shut off so far this year.
I think people should pay their bills, but I understand everyone don't have it, so maybe some payment arrangements or something wouldn't be so bad for some people, but just pay your bills.
Some residents, like Park Crumsley, who paid her water bill Monday, agree with the judge's ruling. The city council recently approved plans for a regional water authority and a $4.5 million fund to help those who can't afford their water bills. The counties are expected to vote on that arrangement in the coming weeks. In Detroit, Robin Schwartz, Fox 2 News.
Let's bring in Fox 2 legal analyst Charlie Langton for more on today's ruling. Charlie, the judge had little sympathy for the people who can't or don't pay their bills.
Well, I don't know that the judge had no sympathy for them. What he didn't have was the authority to do something about it. Now, the judge seemed to go out of his way by saying there's no constitutional right to have free water. And the judge specifically said that he recognized that if you don't have water, there's a harm there. But you know what? You have to pay your bills. And essentially, the judge said, I don't have jurisdiction. The bankruptcy judge is not a king that sits on a throne and can do whatever he wants. Those decisions have to be made by the Detroit City Council, the mayor, and the elected officials. That's essentially what the judge said. But the judge did recognize that if you don't have water, it's harmful. And that and so many people are in poverty, the judge seemed to suggest maybe, why don't you try to settle this? But he was not going to get into it. Now, I think the judge had some sympathy, but he just didn't have the law on his side.
But Charlie, if he said he had no jurisdiction to decide the case, why did he hear it in the first place?
Because there was an issue as to whether or not the judge had some authority. Just about $90 million is outstanding water bills. Wait a minute. If the city collected that, that might help the city. And the judge specifically said that if he would enter a 6-month moratorium, it could cause the city to lose even more money. Now, money is an issue that the judge has a jurisdiction about. And the judge does have a big job coming up when he has to approve this plan of adjustment, which ultimately is going to see whether or not the city can run its own after the bankruptcy. But the bottom line, the judge said, listen, if the grand bargain can get done, make a settlement there, by an agreement, by a mediation, if the Great Lakes Water Authority can get done by an agreement, by a mediation, maybe a water deal is in the works. But the bottom line here is that the judge is going to say, you can do whatever you want. He's not going to get involved in this. But he did want to point out some of the rulings, some of the issues raised by those people who wanted that moratorium. But that's what happened. No free water.
Bottom line. All right, Charlie. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. After about an hour delay, the trial got back together. And this guy, Ken Buckfire, you may not know him, but he's a very influential person in the city of Detroit. He testified that he negotiated that if the plan of adjustment is approved by the bankruptcy judge, about $7 billion will be got right off Detroit's books, wiped away. And that he's also secured about $3 billion of financing. Now, I tried to track him down after the trial. I did track him down, but he wouldn't answer my question because it seemed to me that the judge was really focusing on the part of bankruptcy where the city is going to go forward. What is the city going to do to get out of bankruptcy? How much money is the city going to be able to get from banks that would be willing to invest in this city after it's in bankruptcy? What answer did he give me? Not too much. Now, the person that we were all expecting to testify today, Kevin Orr, he probably would have taken the stand, but for the light bulb incident. Kevin Orr will be on the stand tomorrow, but a guy by the name of Roger Penske will take the stand tomorrow morning, and then, Dan Gilbert will take the stand tomorrow morning, and then Roger Penske by the end of the week. Clearly, the city wants to make an effort to this judge that the financing that it has secured, that the deals that it has made, and the money that it wants to spend on police, on fire, on improvements in the city will be satisfactory to getting out of bankruptcy. And people like Roger Penske, Dan Gilbert will be the people that'll do it. Murray, back to you.
All right, Charlie, is there a chance the judge will not approve a plan of adjustment, which is what this thing is all about?
Actually, yes, and there was some very stinging cross-examination of Mr. Buckfire, and I suspect when Kevin Orr takes the stand, yeah, I think there will be. And you have to go back into history. When the city did secure some financing a couple of months ago, the judge rejected it. He said, you know what, City of Detroit, you didn't cut a very good deal. And I'll tell you, based on the questions that the judge is asking the lawyers and the witnesses today, this judge, Judge Stephen Rhodes, really wants to make sure that the city's financing, that the city will do a good job after it gets out of bankruptcy. So yes, there is a possibility that the judge would reject the city's plan, at least on that level, and then we're back to square one. Or the judge could send it to mediation. Or the judge could say, city, go back and get a better deal. It's all possible. That would delay the trial, but nevertheless, this trial is going to go on for at least another couple of weeks anyway. But this financing is crucial, and people like Kevin Orr, who that we do expect to be on the stand tomorrow, will hopefully be able to prove to the judge that his plan is workable.
All right, so we say to be continued tomorrow. Thank you, Charlie. Fox 2 legal analyst Charlie Langton, live in Detroit.
It was back to bankruptcy court today in Detroit as the city starts its major testimony in the exit portion of the trial. But before that, there were a couple of rulings by Judge Stephen Rhodes that grabbed some attention, especially from those who have shut-off notices from the Water Department. Local 4 Business Editor Rod Maloney was there in the courtroom and joins us live with that. Rod?
Yeah, Guy, you know, Judge Rhodes is a lot of things. He's punctual, he's studious, he's very careful, and it looks like that's what he was doing here, being very careful, spending a couple of days hearing a case that he eventually decided, and he had decided previously, he didn't even have jurisdiction in. But he wanted the case to be heard, and it was, and in the end, he threw out the case. The case before Judge Rhodes was a request for a temporary restraining order that would stop all Detroit water shutoffs until a plan could be developed that would deal with the problem of the poorest of Detroit's poor and their water bills. After 2 days of hearings, the judge ruled that he didn't have that power, and it was a rather resounding rebuke, and that the judge said, quote, Detroiters do not have a right to water service. They do not have the right to water based on the ability to pay, and there is no such right in law, and it is much like that of shelter, food, or medical care as well. He added it is simply inappropriate to grant a 6-month moratorium when the likelihood of success would be so remote and the harm would be so great, end quote. And of the city's plan to get those behind in their payments help, the judge said, quote, it is unclear whether the 10-point plan is of any use to the people who are on fixed or low incomes who chronically don't pay their bills. I urge the city to examine this issue with the sense of urgency that these customers deserve, end quote. Still, Alice Jennings brought the case and was critical of Judge Rhodes outside the courthouse after the hearing.
It's disappointing because the human right to water and the human issues involved, where we know as we're standing here that there are children living in homes without water, and the sanitation and health and safety issues that are being developed.
Now, there was another case that came before the judge this morning, and you may remember the name, Robert Davis. Now, he has pled guilty and is now a convicted felon heading off to jail, and yet still, he is trying to file lawsuits, and he went before the judge, his attorney did, asking for a hearing in Wayne County Court about whether the city council and the mayor violated the Open Meetings Act last week when they negotiated the transition of power from Kevin Orr back to the city council and the mayor. Judge ruled in their favor, and it's likely we'll see a case in Wayne County Court in the weeks to come. Reporting live, Rod Maloney, Local 4.
The live report. And happening now, a special town hall meeting on Detroit's water shutoff. It's wrapping up downtown.
The United Nations sending representatives to hear testimony from residents about their individual situations. 7 Action News reporter Mike Woolfolk is live downtown with the latest. Mike?
Good evening, Dave and Heather. This thing was supposed to wrap up at 6 o'clock, but it is still going on inside. We are at the Wayne County Community College campus here in downtown. This is the latest chapter in the ongoing battle over water in this city. The UN appointing a couple of rapporteurs to come to town to investigate claims of human rights violations as they pertain to the city, cutting off service to people with delinquent bills. There are several hundred people inside, all giving testimony. Some of them are activists, some of them are actual customers. We spoke with a few of them as they were headed into the town hall session. They all say they hope the UN can provide some help that they have been unable to get up to this point.
I'm hoping that they'll be able to resolve the issues that we are facing here in the city of Detroit.
You think that they actually have jurisdiction now?
Yes, I do.
We live in a day and age where we need the water in order for us to survive. We have too many diseases in this world, so we need our water.
We only owe like $220 or something, and they threatened to cut us off. And, you know, I just thought it was unwarranted because the bill was really low.
Now, there is an entire panel of water experts inside joining the two rapporteurs from the UN. They are hearing this testimony, and they will use what they hear to submit a report to the United Nations. Now, what comes out of this at this point is anyone's guess, but they do plan to meet with local officials tomorrow and then hold a news conference to discuss their findings. We're live in downtown Detroit. Mike Wolfo, 7 Action News.
All right, thank you, Mike.